Okay, so the next one is gazing at rocks, which is kind of a funny thing to think of, but it's like, well, we're looking at the different kingdoms of nature, right? So this would be the mineral. So what do we, it's almost weird to think about gazing at a stone or whatever.
I guess in a way, but it's just, let's say it's, one more aspect that's so dense of, energetic, frequency that it'll just give you a really nice continuum of, what's the expanse from most,
Complex and
complex and let's say higher frequency and something that's, very dense. And that's it's a nice way to sort of look at the whole spectrum and say, okay, what are the aspects of this? What Because later you'll correlate that when you're seeing other things, so it's like in a sort of a nice organic way, you're going to see certain you're going to start to notice the differences in all of these kingdoms. And then, when you see something and it has an aspect that you would normally associate with another kingdom, it's going to be like, oh, there's a density there in that person that, normally wouldn't be there. So what is that? That type of thing. So
mm,
it's like you start to like weave these things all in and out. Because again, it's just a continuum, right? It's not like somebody has to be in this zone or has to be in that zone. Everybody's a little bit different. So I think that that's, one of the best uses of of trying to go through all these different kingdoms and see them, adequately or better than adequately.
yeah, yeah. So is it just as simple as picking up a rock from outside and putting it on a table and gazing, or is it, or would you like use a special stone, or would you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because they're
yeah,
all
yeah,
going to be
yeah.
different, right?
Right,
So,
right, right. They'll all be different. So I would do something. I mean, I would do both, right? Because in the winter again, you're not going to have a lot of access, except for things that are obviously above ground. But maybe if they're so small, you're not going to be. It'll be covered in snow or whatever. Uh, but I would say it's the difference between a house plant and you know uh, vegetation that's in the wild. So I I would say I would highly encourage that you go to the outside first and try it there because it's they're so dense that it's
stones in general are so dense.
yeah, so it's going to take a little bit of time. Let's say more time. Don't be discouraged that you're not seeing anything right away. It's like it takes a little time to sort of acclimate yourself or and train yourself to that frequency, because it's very dense and compact and a little slower in a way than plants or animals or people, right? So and again, like if we're trying to pick out the differences, right? So if it's something that's embedded in the earth, like I would say use a bigger, something that you can easily see above the ground, but it's like in the ground, then you'll start to see, you won't see that etheric line around the stone right away. You'll probably see it closer to the ground first, and maybe even like that, almost like a shadow. If the light source is on the backside and the shadow of a stone came out, and you were facing that shadow, it's almost like that etheric line starts on the bottom and then sort of extends. It'll seem like it's extending out toward you, but it's really extending like into the ground. And and why is this? It took me a long time to figure that out, because it really was different than everything else, really different than everything else. So, uh, but when you think about it, it does make some kind of sense in the end. What I came up with was that uh, stones. I mean, where people are walking around on the earth and they're part of the same energy and all of that, and animals kind of in the same category. Plants are drawing from the earth and connected to it, but at the same time, it's a different representation, a different manifestation than the earth itself, right? And so, but stones are the earth. They're they're part of that. They're just a sort of like the difference between you know, like the flame on top of a fire and the coals. They're connected. There's just a, you know, different manifestation of that. And so it's the same thing with stones that are grounded in the earth, right? They're literally connected. There's very little difference, almost none at all, between the actual earth and the stone that you're seeing that's represented on the surface, right? So, you know, because of that, you know, it's basically like you're trying to see the earth itself. And so it takes a little time to sort of bring that up, but that's why it sort of swells from the ground first. And then as you're observing that more, it's like it engulfs and encompasses that, you know, the stone itself, the outcropping of the earth. So stones that are just on top, even though they may be separate units, they don't feel separate from the earth. So it's like you know, it takes a little time to see that outcropping, but what you see is the connection first. That's what's sort of bleeding to the surface. When you observe long enough, you'll see that sort of bleeding to the surface, and then it'll start to like go up and around or whatever, encompass the whole thing. So,
And that's different than a stone that you have inside or
yeah.
that you've held on to for a while or something like that.
Yep. A stone that you know have that you like, say you just pick up a stone in your driveway or whatever, or something big enough to actually see, like fist size or a little bit bigger or whatever. You put it on a counter to do that, and to do the gazing exercise, obviously. And so for that, again, it'll take a little longer to see that than it would even to see the one outside, and definitely longer than to see some, you know, plant, animal, people, whatever.
Now, why is it that it takes longer?
It's so dense. Remember, the reason you can see it at all is because you're in training to that frequency. And it takes a while for you to become that solid, for you to get that view. You know, frequency entrains to frequency. If it's, you know, it's the reason we can't see, you know, infrared rays or, you know, ultraviolet rays or whatever. You know, it's like when the spectrum is too high, I mean, it's like we can be impacted by it, but we're not visually seeing it. And so it's the same thing with this. We need to, you know, we entrain to it. So if I wanted to see the, let's say, infrared spectrum, you know, I'd need a special set of glasses, goggles, whatever, you know, binoculars, you know, to night vision, you know, to see that, and then it would come out that way. So we see the heat signature of it. But as far as my normal eyes, I'm not going to be able to see that. So it's, again, how do I entrain myself to that frequency level?
So seeing in an energetic sense always involves entrainment.
Yes. And, you know, hence why relaxation is such a crucial part, because the relaxation, it's like putting your, you know, it's like a standard car, right? It's like you always go through neutral to get to the next gear. It's always in neutral to get to the next gear, right? There's no like jumping from first to second. You have to pass neutral to get there, right? And on and on. So, so it's the same thing with this, right? The relaxation is our neutral, where we're transitioning from one place to another, or one frequency to another. So we're trying to entrain to that which we're trying to observe. And so in doing so, you know, we get to view it. We can perceive it in more of its wholeness than we would just the superficial, what's on the surface.
Now, if it's a stone that I have that I feel like I have a connection with because I've had it around for a long time, do you think does that mean that I'm more entrained to it and it'll be a little easier to perceive?
Probably a little easier. I don't know if you know, I think that, trying to think if in my experience that's been easier. I feel like it's almost in the same category. I don't know if, unless it's a stone that you've worked with for a long, long time, and I mean a long time, like 10 years or more, then, you know, then there'll be a connection where there's a bit of transference that goes back and forth between you and the stone. The stone holds some of your energy, and you know, and you've acclimated to some of it. So,
but in
then
general,
there would be more connection.
But in general, with the mineral kingdom, it's just so dense that it there's always that element of time of entrainment, or let's just say entrainment, because it
Yeah.
could be different depending on
It'll
how
be different
relaxed
for
you
each
can
person,
get.
right, right, and how well they can slip into that neutral and let themselves sort of go into that place. You know, it's funny. I mean, we have this narrow band of comfort, interacting, talking, whatever. You know, it's like, you know, if somebody's, you know, let's say way above us, you know, if they're talking about things that are, you know, really out of our understanding or whatever, I mean, you know, we have a little sense of discomfort, like I'm not really understanding or I'm not really getting this. I mean, he's talking about, you know, like nuclear reactors. I have no idea. He lost me after the first three sentences, you know, but he's going on and on about this stuff, and you feel a little, you know, like I'm not really getting it. I'm a little uncomfortable. That's a minimal version, right? But you know, think about it. It's like that's just an example of this narrow band of our comfort zone, right? And so all of our new experiences sort of push a little bit on either side of that. So whether it's trying to entrain up to something or go a little, make our frequency a little bit faster, a little bit, faster is the best. So that's good. But think about the mineral kingdom. It's like I'm going to make myself more dense. Most people would rather feel lighter than heavier. So there's even more discomfort in doing that. So there is some natural resistance to sort of making yourself as solid as a stone, to making yourself feel like you're rooted, you're heavy, you're almost in a state of paralysis, you know, because you're just so dense. And so, but that sort of gets you in that place. You're not trying to do it, it just happens. The more that I'm gazing and relaxing and being in neutral, you'll just feel when you're in training to something like that, it's just like, oh boy, I'm like in statue mode. You know, you don't feel like you want to move. You feel like it's easier to just sort of like be in one position and just, you can almost imagine yourself becoming more solid, more heavy, more dense. And, you know, and so that can be uncomfortable for people, you know, when they already feel like they're being pushed down all the time and they want to break free of that. I mean, and so sort of to intentionally and voluntarily go there, it can be, you know, more uncomfortable for people than going in the other direction. Everybody wants to fly and go, you know, be up. You know, it's like I want to be up. You know,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it, and be lighter. You know, so but this is sort of the opposite. So it's, but it has its benefits too. You know, real benefits. So, but you know, you have to be willing to experiment with that and sort of get in that stage and really get down there. But it'll be, you know, you'll be adequately compensated for that with the experience. You know, if you can let yourself go into that place, and it's a great thing to be able to be more solid, be more dense. You know, be more grounded. I mean, a lot of people need that, and so. You know, there are all types of situations where that's desired more than being, you know, up and high and flying around and whatever, you know. So, yeah,
Hmm.
that's about all I have to say about
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mineral Kingdom as far as the stones go, anyway.
No, that's cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
no problem.